On today's episode, we're taking a look at the lightly refreshed 2017 Toyota Highlander. For 2017, Toyota has given us a new look up front, a new look out back, new engines, new transmissions under the hood, and a tweaked interior. But perhaps the biggest change is that Toyota is now including their new Safety Sense P package in all Highlander models. Safety Sense P includes radar adaptive cruise control, pre-collision braking, pedestrian detection, lane keeping assistance, lane departure warning, and a few other safety features. One of the big changes for 2017 is this new front end design. As you recall, the 2016 model had a much smaller grille. This now extends all the way down here towards the bottom. It's somewhat reminiscent of the spindle grille we see on Lexus models, although I think this is more demure and more attractive. Depending on the trim level you get, the grille is either silver painted like we're seeing right here, black painted in the sportier trims, or chrome in the very top end trims. The structure of the Highlander has not changed for 2017. That means this is still 191.1 inches long. That makes this one of the shorter entries in this segment, although it is still 4 inches longer than the Kia Sorento, which is available as either a 2 or a 3-row crossover. But this is about 10 inches shorter than a Dodge Durango and about 3 inches shorter than a Honda Pilot, about 7 inches shorter than a Nissan Pathfinder. Despite being on the smaller end of the scale, the Highlander is one of the few vehicles in this segment available in an 8-passenger configuration. That said, however, the third row right back here and the cargo area is going to be a bit more compact than that Nissan. The changes out back are a little bit more subtle than the changes up front. They're pretty much limited to new tail lamp modules right down here and some slight changes at the bottom end of the bumper if you get the upper end trims. We get chrome rings around these reflectors in those top end models. That means that the Highlander has retained its relatively practical square rear end that improves cargo space in the back, cargo practicality, and we still have a rarity in the crossover segment, which is a glass that opens separately from the tailgate. Under the hood, things still start out with a 2.7-liter 4-cylinder engine. This is a fairly large displacement 4-cylinder engine for this segment. The average seems to be right around 2.4 liters if it's offered at all. That engine produces 185 horsepower. It's essentially the same as last year, and it's still mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission. Then we get a brand new 3.5-liter V6 that we're driving in this particular model. Power is up to 295 horsepower, and this is now mated to a new 8-speed automatic transmission. This is essentially the same engine and transmission that we see in the Lexus RX 350, although the power output levels are just a little bit different. There's also a revised hybrid system that gets a little bit more oomph than last year. As before, front-wheel drive is standard, all-wheel drive is optional, and thanks to the new 8-speed automatic transmission, fuel economy has been significantly improved for the 2017 model year. This is now 2 to 3 miles per gallon higher depending on the model that you get versus the 2016 model year Highlander, and remember that the EPA has revised their 2017 fuel economy scale, so this is actually a little bit more fuel efficient than that in real-world driving. One of the biggest improvements in the Highlander's fuel efficiency scale is the city score with the V6 engine, and that's because we now have an available start-stop system that you'll find on most V6 Highlander models. Front seat comfort continues to be good for this segment. We get a tilt telescopic steering column with a small range of motion, but we do have a multi-way power driver's seat available that also has an available thigh cushion extension. That's definitely an option that I would get. You don't see too many extending thigh cushions in this segment, and for my height, it really improves front seat comfort. On the downside, you won't find 4-way adjustable lumbar support in the Highlander. It's strictly a 2-way design. Second row comfort in the Highlander is good, even though this is one of the smaller 3-row crossovers in this segment. You can slide the second row forward and backward to help apportion the space a little bit more equitably between the first, second, and third rows. Headroom is generous. Even in our sunroof-equipped model, I have about 2 inches of headroom here on the outboard seating position, and the seats recline as well with a decent amount of recline motion. Moving over to the middle seat, nice touch here is that the middle seat is not really that much higher off the ground than the outboard seating positions, meaning I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom. A big change in the Highlander is that previously this center seat was not available in the top end trims of the gasoline Highlander. Previously, if you wanted the top end platinum trim, you got captain's chairs in the second row, and that cut the Highlander down to a 7-passenger version, and that meant that the 7th passenger had to sit in the middle of that rather compact third row. For 2017, you can opt for the 8-passenger version, which gives you the much more comfortable center seat in this row versus that row back there. I actually think this is a practical thing to do because it means you can fit 5 people in the top-end trims a little bit more comfortably than you would have last year. The third row in the Highlander is still quite compact, although getting back here is pretty easy. We simply slide those seats forward, then we can reach forward, pull them right back into position. The Highlander is one of the few three-row crossovers that gives us a three-person third-row bench seat. It's a little bit tight back here compared to the second row, of course. Although the Highlander is on the small end of this segment, headroom is just about as generous as any of the other three-row crossovers. The one thing to know is that at 6 feet tall, my head is not touching this headrest, it's actually touching the back of this roof right here. Like most three-row crossovers, cargo space is pretty limited behind the third row. In a way, this is one of the reasons to buy the 8-passenger version of the Highlander in those top-end trims, because if you want to carry 5 passengers and 5 passengers worth of cargo, you are going to have to fold this third row seat. We do find a little bit of additional storage space right here under this cargo area load floor in the back, but it's going to be fairly tight back here compared to some of the larger entries in this segment. The interior is largely the same as the 2016 Highlander, so we don't have a panoramic moonroof, although we do have height adjustable seatbelts, and we are in the model with the leather upholstery. As before, the door features soft touch points where your elbow is most likely to impact the door, although we do find hard plastics in these tan sections and then this sort of contrasting blue trim right here. The dashboard design has not changed too much. We are in the XLE trim, so we do have this touchscreen infotainment and navigation system. We also have tri-zone climate control. Below the climate controls, we have a storage shelf right here, and we have a removable insert right there that you can pop out to run your USB cables through to the USB ports that are below that. For 2017, Toyota has really upped the USB count. We have 3 right here up front and then 2 in the rear, a 12-volt power port, our stability and traction control button here, snow mode, hill descent control, and then a button to lock the all-wheel drive center coupling. That storage trough runs all the way across to the passenger side. As you can see, we can put glasses, phones, that sort of thing right there and hold them in place. And then we have a moderately sized bin-style glove compartment. Continuing down the center console, we have a fairly traditional console shifter, sport mode over to the left. This is also where you'll find the manual mode, up for up and down for down. We have the switches for the heated seat controls right here in 3 different steps, and then 2 very large cup holders on the right. We still find a large and softly padded center console between the front seats. We have 2 roller covers, one that slides backwards and one that slides forwards. Inside the console, we have a storage shelf that slides forwards and backwards, and it's also removable from the vehicle. You can fit 2 gallons of milk right here inside the center console, and there's an additional 12-volt power port. On the driver's side, we have essentially the same instrument cluster as before, tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right, with a color multifunction display in between. The steering wheel is a 3-spoke design with this large spoke right down at the bottom. It also has sport grips right up top, and our trim does have a leather-wrapped wheel. You'll find the controls for the infotainment system over here on the left side, volume up, down, track forward, backward, etc. On the right side, we find the buttons for the multifunction display between the speedometer and the tachometer, and the controls for our radar adaptive cruise control and lane departure mitigation system. This button sets the vehicle's following distance between the Highlander and the vehicle in front of you, and then the rest of the cruise controls are actually on the stalk right here behind the wheel that does move with the steering wheel, just like we see in other Toyota products. Obviously, the big difference between this Highlander and the 2016 model we last tested is the engine and the transmission. Thanks to this new engine, not only do we get better fuel economy, but we also get better performance, because first gear is much lower in this Toyota Aisin 8-speed automatic than the previous 6-speed. We ran from 0 to 60 in 7.1 seconds in our preliminary tests. Again, this is a first drive, so all of these scores are preliminary. You will have to wait till we get one on our own home test track in order for official results. But for the moment, it appears that this is 0.2 of a second faster than the previous generation Highlander, and that now makes this faster than something like a Mazda CX-9. In our preliminary braking tests, we ran from 60 to 0 in this XLE model in 130 feet, which is fairly average for this segment. You will find that some of the sportier crossovers stop a little bit shorter than this. One thing's for sure, however, the Highlander definitely has more passing power than it did in previous generations. One of the really nice things about this particular 8-speed automatic transmission is how normal it feels. And I know that sounds strange to comment on, but compared to the ZF 9-speed automatic that we see in the Honda Pilot, the Acura MDX, and certain Chrysler products, this is much smoother. That really shouldn't surprise you, because this is essentially the same automatic transmission that we find in some mini models, the BMW X1, the Volvo S90, and the Volvo XC90. Aisin makes the 8-speed automatic transmission for Volvo and a number of those other luxury car companies, and of course Toyota owns 30% of Aisin, so that's why we see it right here under the hood of the Highlander. When it comes to ride and handling scores, not too much has changed for the Highlander for 2017. This still rides and handles just about the same as the last model. The ride is a little bit softer than some of the sportier entries in this segment, most notably some of the versions of the Kia Sorento or the Mazda CX-9. You'll definitely feel a slightly harsher ride in those models, but this isn't exactly pillow soft either, so this is not quite as soft as something like a Nissan Pathfinder. As you'd expect, handling therefore falls right in between some of those other entries. It's not quite as soft, not quite as ponderous as something like the Pathfinder, but it's not quite as sharp as a Mazda CX-9 either. The steering is very accurate, but it's definitely numb, just like most of the electric power steering systems that we see these days. When it comes to cabin noise, the Highlander really hasn't changed too much for this model year, which means it's still fairly middle of the pack when it comes to overall road noise. Tire noise is fairly well controlled, as is wind noise, but because this is a three-row crossover, it's going to be a little bit louder than some of those smaller crossovers we see on the market. It's not quite as tomb silent as we see in the brand new Buick Enclave or in certain versions of the Mazda CX-9. Fuel economy is of course a big buzzword, especially in the crossover segment, and we do have a significant increase for 2017 in the Highlander. It's been a little difficult for us to comment on this, but Toyota does say that we should expect about a 3 mile per gallon increase in the 2017 model year, and I don't doubt it. The 8-speed automatic transmission has had a big fuel economy improvement in every vehicle that has used this transmission or any of the related models of the 8-speed automatic, so I do expect that to translate right here to the Highlander. The other thing that the Highlander gets is that start-stop system in most models that have the V6 engine, and that will really improve your city fuel economy if you don't mind having the air conditioning turn off when you're at a stop. That's the big difference between the Highlander start-stop system and the Highlander Hybrid, which also of course has a start-stop system. The Highlander Hybrid has an electric air conditioning system, so the air conditioning will keep right on pumping in your Phoenix 120-degree weather, but this system won't. So instead, the Highlander will actually try and keep the engine on if it thinks that it's too hot outside and the cabin needs cooling. So you actually will get less of an advantage in those hotter climates, more of an advantage in a climate like Seattle, where the system can just turn off the engine and you don't have to worry about that. As far as start-stop systems go, this is one of the smoother systems that we've tested. We don't really see too much body motion as the engine stops and then restarts. The key takeaway for 2017 is that this is more of a refinement of what we already saw in the 2016 Highlander. Nothing major has changed. The driving dynamics of the vehicle really aren't that much different. The transmission, although it has 2 extra gears, doesn't really feel substantially different than the 6-speed that preceded it. The engine's definitely more powerful, but it's not a significant power increase. It's not getting an extra 100 horsepower or anything like that. The vehicle feels a little bit quicker, it's definitely a little bit more efficient, it may even be a little bit quieter, we really don't know yet. Although not strictly part of our typical driving scores, it is worth commenting on the standard radar adaptive cruise control system. This is not one of the smoother systems that I've driven out on the market. Typically the European systems from BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, Audi, etc., they're a little bit smoother, a little bit more natural feeling in their operation. However, the fact that we have radar adaptive cruise control standard in all models of the Highlander is really a big change for this segment. Honda has been pretty aggressive at offering their Honda Sensing system in a wider variety of their trim lines and vehicles than we've seen in the past, but Toyota really is taking the new lead here by making it standard in the Highlander and a variety of other Toyota models for 2017. Toyota has not released pricing for the 2017 Highlander yet, so it is really difficult to compare this to the competition. However, we don't expect the Highlander to be that much more expensive than the 2016 model year. There may be a perhaps $500 increase for the base trim, and some of the other trim lines may rearrange in price. Some may be less expensive, some may be more expensive. That means that the value is likely going to increase for the 2017 model year, because pricing shouldn't be too far off the 2016 model year, but we get a whole lot of new standard equipment in this model. Most importantly, that new Toyota safety system. Radar adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assistance, pre-collision braking, all that sort of stuff is available in the vast majority of the competition, but not in their base trims. And not only is it available in the base trims, it's actually standard for 2017 in the new Highlander model. The Toyota safety system package is very similar to what we see over there in the Honda Pilot, except that the Honda Pilot doesn't get it until upper end trims, and in certain trims it becomes standard. Over here in the Highlander, again, it's standard in all the models. Until we can get our hands on one for a complete week, and until we have complete pricing, you're going to have to stay tuned for our detailed comparison section. Until then, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2017 Toyota Highlander. Be sure and click that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. Check out those related videos on the side, and I'll see you next week.